So in light of this month's theme, I want to share a little story with you today about getting lost. In 2013, I walked to the coffee shop across the street from my apartment in New York City, and I opened my computer, I launched a mapping program, and on a whim, I typed the word Earth into the search bar, thinking it would zoom out, show the entire planet, and I would carry on with my business and get back to work. However, to my surprise, when I pressed enter that day, it did not zoom out, instead it zoomed in. And this is a picture that I saw of Earth, Texas, a small town I had never heard of before, and in theory here, I was lost. This picture would change my life forever. And today I want to talk about how and why this happened. So what was going on for me in 2013? At the time, I was working at a brand strategy and design consulting firm called Lippincott. Fantastic place to work, but I could not figure out why everyone at this office would get their lunch, go back to their cubicle, and not talk to anybody else. So it was my instinct at the time, fresh out of college, perhaps not really thinking through the implications of this, but I started a space club at Lippincott called Lipinfinity. It's a naming firm, so I thought that was appropriate. What happened at Lipinfinity? It was just an excuse to get people together on a monthly basis, kind of just like this, to talk about different themes related to outer space. What was NASA doing? What happened with this meteorite in Russia? What is the sun? Just different things that aren't connected to your day-to-day job, something that might provide a new perspective. Because I did this and because I put myself out as the space guy, thankfully I didn't get fired for doing this. One of my colleagues sent me an email one day and said, "I know you love outer space, I just came across this Vimeo video, you should check it out." And I want to share a few minutes of this film with you now.
Oh golly, I remember going through launch, which is an overwhelming experience. The engines cut off. I felt myself floating out of the seat. I floated over to the window, looked out, and we were coming up over the coast of Africa. And that's when it hit me. I'm in space. And, I just got incredibly excited because it's something I had dreamed about since I was 6 years old.
I think you start out with this idea of what it's going to be like. And then when you do finally look at the Earth for the first time, you're overwhelmed by how much more beautiful it really is when you see it for real. It's just like it's this dynamic, alive place that you see glowing all the time.
It was truly incredible to be up there, doing what I always wanted to do my whole life, and then to kind of glance back at our planet and see that view was just tremendous.
I can only describe what I've seen. Looking down at the Earth and you see that line that separates day into night slowly moving across the planet. Thunderstorms on the horizon casting these long shadows as the sun sets. And then watching the Earth come alive and you see the lights from the cities and the towns.
The events you see from space, like flying over thunderstorms, looking at them from the top, were spectacular. Like a fireworks show going on and you're looking at it from the very top.
Shooting stars going below us or dancing curtains of auroras. It's just very hard to describe all the colors, the beauty, the motion.
So that was the film overview. I had never seen anything like this before. The film was 18 minutes long and I was glued to my screen for the entirety of it. These incredible time-lapse images of the Earth from outer space combined with these anecdotes of these astronauts who said they were forever and profoundly changed by what they saw. This feeling is commonly called the overview effect, and it stuck with me, right? This idea I thought had the potential to change the future, and I became obsessed with this film. I was sending it to my family and my friends, but I didn't necessarily know how to act upon that. Fast forward a few months later, I'm walking around New York City, getting directions like we all do. There's this little blue dot on my phone, and I think, hey, that's a space story. I can talk about satellites in the next Lip Infinity meeting. And in the midst of preparing this conversation that I was doing at work for the satellites talk, I went to this coffee shop, I opened Apple Maps, I typed in Earth, thinking it would zoom out and show the whole thing like we just discussed, because I was obsessed with this idea of the overview effect, and that's how I got lost in Earth, Texas on the 14th of December in 2013 at 3:29 p.m. So, a lot has happened in the last 6 years since this moment. That day, however, I went back to my apartment with this image, and I said to my roommates at the time, does anyone know what the hell this is? Right? I just opened my screen, and it was this most awe-inspiring collection of these Pac-Man, pie charts, whatever images it conjures for you. And that afternoon, this image set me off on this adventure with my roommates at the time to find these places and moments that humans have created. For example, one of my roommates was from Europe, and he said, you should check out the port of Rotterdam. It's one of the largest shipping facilities in the world. And this is the image that we found. Perhaps a mundane place on the ground, but when you look at this systematic organization of shipping containers from above, this is what you see. I had a friend who just got back from vacation in Arizona. He said, I drove by an airplane graveyard while I was there. Can you find that? And this is 4,400 retired military aircraft, which are kept in the desert so the metal can be scrapped for parts. Another friend was working in energy. He said, can you find a solar concentrator? This is one we found that first day in Seville, Spain. What you're seeing here is 3,000 mirrors, which are arrayed in concentric circles around an 100-meter tall tower, which contains salt, which gets heated by the light reflected upwards from the mirrors below and generates enough electricity to power 30,000 homes in Spain. And last but not least, my best friend's wife was working at an NGO at the time, and she said, can you find Dadaab refugee camp? And this is what I found. And this image in particular, I think more than any others, helped me realize that there was a powerful story to tell here. When you look at this image, I think it is stunningly beautiful. This beautiful orangish red color of the Kenyan soil, and you have this kind of intriguing grid pattern on the left, which is actually an area called the LFO extension. Because the camp is filled to capacity here on the right side, they've built this area on the left side, which is slowly filling up with these white dots, which are more and more tense over time. So combining something that is stunningly beautiful, but perhaps when you read more and you do a bit more research, there's a deeper story to tell. That was the discovery here. And soon enough, I had amassed a collection of about 40, 45 of these pictures on my computer. I was kind of secretly doing it at Lippincott at work, kind of looking over my shoulder to be sure no one saw I was on Apple Maps all day long. But one night, built a Squarespace website and called the project Daily Overview, with the simple idea that I would post one of these pictures every day, and I aimed to inspire the overview effect. There were a lot of projects that were launching at the time, like Humans of New York, that had this very simple, repeatable, almost predictable format with a picture and a description. So that was very inspiring when I launched it. But I had no intention of where it would go or what it would become. That was where it started. I think one of the most important, oh, there's the logo with the orbiting D. One of the most important platforms that made this possible was Instagram. The project just passed 750,000 followers on Instagram, and to see it grow and become something in a world that is primarily filled with myself and selfies, I think has been pretty cool that there are no people in any of our pictures. One of the most important things we can provide with our daily posts is context. So this is an example of a post from our website now. We'll give the title and then a short 3 or 4 sentence description to describe what you're seeing, as well as geo-coordinates if you want to check it out yourself on Google or Apple Maps. The appeal of the imagery to have this kind of abstract look, which I'll talk about in a second, I think, is what we want to use to get your attention. But if we don't give you the explanation to describe what you're seeing in the image, there's nothing you can take away from that. So context is absolutely essential to anything that we do. Now, what inspired me to take that picture of Earth, Texas, and make a photography or art project out of it? At the time, I was living in New York, as I said, and historically, I don't think I would have called myself a creative person, but after college, I got a DSLR camera as a graduation gift from my presents, and I would go on these long photo walks in New York City and just became obsessed with taking pictures kind of primarily of buildings, kind of architectural photographs. And I was looking for these lines and angles and kind of one-point perspective images that just kind of appealed to me. So that was kind of this photographic visual aesthetic that I was developing in the 2 years before I got lost in Earth, Texas. Also, as a hobby, I started painting. And in New York, I was living in the midst of some of the world's best museums and galleries and just fell in love with abstract expressionist paintings. So these are a few paintings that I did where I was simply copying almost my favorite artists and was just kind of dabbling in this as a hobby. I wasn't telling anyone about this. But when you come across an image of Earth, Texas on your computer, instead of just moving on to the next thing, my thought was, wow, that looks like an abstract painting. So in the past 6 years, I've created almost 1,000 images, and going back through, you might notice that some of them have this feel. This cattle feedlot in Texas might look a lot like a Mondrian grid painting, my favorite artist. Ipanema Beach in Brazil, with the beach right down the middle, might resemble a Barnett Newman strip painting. This image of deforestation in Bolivia with the rainforest on top and deforestation on the bottom looks a lot like the color blocking of an Ellsworth Kelly painting. And last but not least, Lake Mead in the United States looks a lot like a Clifford Still painting. And he is a painter who was depicting the American West in this abstract way, and I wish I could bring him back to life and say, you are doing a very good job of that. So as I said, a lot has happened in the last 6 years since Daily Overview launched. So much so that a couple of months ago, we changed the name to Overview to speak more appropriately to all of the different things that we are doing. So I want to talk about how this operates as a project, as a business. From the beginning, the mission has been the same, through Daily Overview through Overview. And it's quite simply to inspire the overview effect. I learned about this idea through that film, and it has motivated every single thing I've done since the project launched in 2013. But on that very first day, when I was looking through these images with my roommates, we decided that we would focus on the places that humans were impacting the planet. Not just everything, not just the most beautiful places, but there was a story there of this world that we're creating. And not just to show the bad things or the good things, but everything in between. The full spectrum of what civilization looks like. And I think this has guided all of the projects that we've done in the past and will continue to guide what we're doing in the future. So in 2016, I had the opportunity to write a coffee table book overview. There's a copy circulating in the back if you want to flip through it later. And most recently, this was turned into the Young Explorers edition, which was rewritten for kids 8 to 12 so that they can understand what's going on with the climate and how we are impacting it. When I launched the project, I thought it would be about sustainability and environmental. So doing a commissioned piece for Audubon magazine about encroachment in the Arctic would have made a lot of sense. What I could have never imagined is how this perspective would appeal across kind of all topics and all magazines like Foreign Policy, who asked us to do a feature on different mines around the world, not for environmental reasons, just about mining, or working with organizations like Four Seasons to photograph their destinations from above in a beautiful way. That's Tulips in Holland for a recent magazine that they did. People started asking me, can I buy these images? Can I buy a print of one of these images? I said, sure. I had absolutely no idea if that was possible, but you figure these things out as you go along, and soon enough we were able to get the highest resolution images from a satellite partner we work with and started selling prints. This is from a collection that's sold in CB2 stores. So seeing the images get out into the mainstream commercial world has been pretty cool to see, while still being able to talk about our mission and speak about the things that we're showing. We've been lucky enough to do exhibitions all around the world. This is one that has been done the last 2 years in Sweden. I'm about to head there in a few weeks to do it again in a different town, but this is a mobile exhibition that can fit inside a shipping container and then be placed in public squares. So getting these images not behind the walls of an exclusive gallery, but out in public spaces where anyone can stumble upon them and learn a bit more about what they're seeing. It was incredible. This is in a small town called U, to see people kind of just walking in the midst of their day, and they see this kind of bizarre arrangement of massive billboards almost, and with their kids they would walk up and they'd point things out and they'd explain it. And that's where we think this can be most powerful. It's extremely accessible. You don't need an art historical background to understand what you're seeing in the images. Anyone can take what they want and bring their own kind of perspective and experience to an image and learn something new. Recently, we've been dabbling with these photo murals. This is a piece we just installed in a Facebook office in Sausalito. This is 31 feet long, so truly tapping into the full resolution of the satellite cameras. The cameras are so good that you could take a picture of a beach ball on the Golden Gate Bridge in full resolution from Los Angeles. So think about that for a second. It's crazy, and they're primarily used for surveillance purposes, not artistic purposes, but we think it's the most incredible, powerful tool to show people where they are and give this context. Within probably 10 minutes of this being installed, I saw everyone from the office manager to the security guard to an engineer to a designer walk up to this thing and figure out where they were and figure out where they lived. And I think it's a universal feeling that transcends any occupation or person, period. So this is something we're really excited about and hope to do a lot more of in the future. For the last 8 months, we've been redesigning our web experience to create something that's a bit more enjoyable and immersive than a Squarespace website. So we just launched overview.com. One of the things I'm most excited about is we took the roughly 900 best images from our library and put them in geographical context, right? So not just a feed, but being able to search around the world of where an image is located, and also sorted them by these 9 themes that we came up with. And this is really our picture of what civilization and the planet looks like. I'm going to walk through each of the themes now so you can understand kind of how we divvy things up. And the last theme there is nature, which speaks to the natural world. So just a few images here. So food, where do we get our food from? I showed this image before, but want to speak about it a bit more. This is deforestation in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. So it's very easy, I think, to say, save the rainforest, right? And I absolutely agree with that, obviously. But when you say save the rainforest, I think you need to understand why it's being cut down. In this particular area, the left side of your screen has been converted into fields for mechanized agriculture and cattle ranching. So there are a lot of people on the ground in Bolivia who want to feed their families and make a living, and accordingly they're cutting down the trees around them to do so. So I think this image is purposely composed with this center cut, perhaps an ominous sign of what's to come, but just creating that full picture, right? It's not so simple as we need to save the rainforest. You need to understand why it's being cut down to create the solutions to save it. Mining, where do we get our raw materials from? This is one of my favorite images from the project. This is an iron ore mine in Pilbara, Australia. So if you have a dishwasher or a refrigerator made of stainless steel or anything made of stainless steel, 98% of the world's mined iron ore is converted into stainless steel, so probably comes from a place like this. Energy, where do we get our power from? How do we turn the lights? How do we charge our cell phones? How do we create civilization that is powered? There are many different ways to generate energy. This is one of the world's largest oil refineries in South Korea. It's enormous and has a capacity to produce 1.2 million barrels of oil every day. And there are also more sustainable forms of energy and perhaps more beautiful forms of energy. This is an offshore wind farm between Copenhagen and Malmö, Sweden, called Middelgrunden. And you can see the turbines beautifully arrayed in the water there. cities. So cities and smart cities will become more and more important as more and more people move into urban areas in the future. Thinking about how these cities are designed, how people move through them, around them, under them, will be more and more important. Here is a particularly beautiful example of the Shampo district in Barcelona with these strict grid streets, the apartments that have communal courtyards in the middle. And if you look closely, you'll see that the intersections are actually octagons, which creates more parking and better ventilation at street level. Transport, so as I mentioned, you have these cities. How do you move through them, between them? This is one particular example, I think, of kind of trade and global commerce is so essential to the civilization that we've created, and just an absolutely stunning and favorite image of mine. These are shipping oil tankers and container ships, outside the port of Singapore, a facility which accounts for 1/5 of the world's supply of shipping containers and half the world's supply of crude oil, like the oil refinery that you saw before. And when all of these chapters and themes kind of complete, they don't really end there, right? There's often byproducts that are created from mining or cities. We all have trash. It all has to go somewhere. So just one example, those ships that you just saw, when they are decommissioned, often end up in a place like this. This is a shipbreaking facility in Chittagong, Bangladesh, one of the world's most horrible places to work. These ships are being broken apart by explosions and rudimentary tools, often by people who are migrant workers who don't want to be there, but they are scrapped for parts and then recycled. So what are we working on now? That project, I think, is kind of wrapped up, this kind of single image, and we want to do something different. So I have 2 weeks to finish my next book with my co-author, Tim, who's here. We are hard at work, and we're trying to figure out, what does change look like? This is a project we're calling Time Lapse, and I want to share a few examples of what we've been up to. So we have access to up to 30 years of satellite data, which enables us to tell stories like this. This is Las Vegas, captured in 1989, and if you compare it to an image captured just this year, you can see the 3x population explosion of Las Vegas. Or the Camp Fire, which is such a tragic, horrible story which happened last year. This is a trailer park in Paradise, California, before the fire and after. In 2015, an iron ore mine had a dam collapse in southeastern Brazil, causing one of the country's worst environmental disasters of all time. This is the town of Bento Rodrigues, seen just before the event, and after the event, you can see millions of liters of sludge and wastewater that ripped through the town, killing 18 people and releasing an unknowable amount of environmental damage as this sludge entered into the Rio Doce River and flooded all the way to the ocean. And to end on a much more positive note, these are the tulip fields in Holland, seen in March. The flowers bloom in April every year, so when you compare this image before to after, you can see the flowers bloom. So, thinking about getting lost, I want to share one quote that I found as I was thinking about this talk today. Eventually, we realize that not knowing what to do is just as real and just as useful as knowing what to do. Not knowing stops us from taking false directions. Not knowing what to do, we start to pay real attention. Just as people lost in the wilderness, on a cliff face, or in a blizzard pay attention with a kind of acuity that they would not have if they knew where they were. Why? Because for those who are really lost, their life depends on paying real attention. If you think you know where you are, you stop looking. So for me, when I got lost here, I started to pay attention. And I think I had this almost 3-year period of experimentation with art and painting and photography and art history that made me realize that something like this was special. I could have easily moved on to the next thing, but this combined all of my interests at the time: outer space, photography, painting, social media, technology, into one. And that enabled me to get lost in this project. When people ask me now, what should I do for my next job? What should I do for my career? I say, think about the activities or the moments where you lose track of time, right? I was doing this for hours and hours, and it didn't matter anymore kind of about my other work or obligations. This is what I wanted to do. My 10th grade history teacher said to me when I told him once that I got lucky on a project, he said, luck is the place where opportunity and preparation intersect. And I think I might say I got lucky and I discovered this when I got lost, but there was a lot of work that had been done, I think, for fun and adventure that made me realize this was something special. So yeah, think about the moments where you lose track of time, and I think you will get closer and closer to discovering the things that you want to do and where you want to devote your energy. So thank you so much for coming out on an early Friday morning, and I'll